You want beef? Okay, cool. This was the days you go to a crib, you knock on the door. You know his parent.
He's known for his energy, his wild stage presence, and his larger-than-life charisma, but behind the smiles and the animated performances, Busta Rhymes has carried grudges that nobody saw coming. Some of them started as jokes, others turned deadly serious. And one was so personal, he kept it hidden for years. What if I told you that the very rappers you thought were his friends were actually the ones he hated the most? Tonight, we revealed a 6-artist Busta Rhymes finally admitted he couldn't stand. And by the time we reach number 1, you won't believe the reason why. Let's start with number 6, Nizzle Man. The most recent and most viral feud on Busta's list didn't happen in a studio, on wax, or even in an interview. It exploded in real life, under flashing lights, cameras, and cell phones inside Harbor nightclub in Manhattan. The occasion? French Montana's release party for his highly anticipated Mac Cheese 5 mixtape in February 2024. As the music blared and the VIP section packed with New York's elite, chaos erupted. Footage shows Staten Island rapper Nizzle Man being dragged down a narrow staircase by security, his body jerking as they force him through the crowd. Right behind him was none other than Busta Rhymes and the Flip Mode Squad, storming down the stairs like they were ready for battle. Nizzle, visibly shaken but defiant, got back to his feet only for Busta to confront him directly, stepping into his space, gesturing aggressively as security tried to push the younger rapper into another section. The clip cuts off there, but the moment had already gone viral. Within hours, the internet was buzzing. Fans replayed the footage frame by frame, debating, what caused this fight? Was there prior tension between Nizzle and Busta? Or was this a clash of egos inside a packed nightclub? No one knows exactly what triggered it, but the proof was undeniable. Busta wasn't just rumored to be in conflict. This time, there was video evidence. Here's where the irony hits. For Nizzle Man, a 23-year-old on the rise with tracks like True Magic pulling hundreds of thousands of views on YouTube and a new single, Bambi, dropping that same weekend, the altercation thrust him into headlines overnight. Imagine grinding for years, building slowly on the underground circuit, and then suddenly your name trends because of a confrontation with one of hip-hop's living legends. And for Busta, it was proof that even decades into his career, his presence still dominates a room. One viral moment showed that the energy and unpredictability that made him feared in the 90s hadn't gone anywhere, even if the stage had shifted from arenas to the chaos of a Manhattan nightclub. Next is number 5, Jay-Z. Before they were icons, they were just kids in Brooklyn, and the stage wasn't Madison Square Garden or the Grammys, it was a noisy high school cafeteria. George Westinghouse's career in Technical Education High School has since become legendary in hip-hop history, because within its walls walk 3 future giants, the notorious B.I.G., Jay-Z, and Busta Rhymes. Imagine the energy in that building, 3 teenagers unknowingly shaping the future of rap, sharpening their skills, and testing their hunger against one another long before the world knew their names. And somewhere in that cafeteria, a battle went down that Busta Rhymes never forgot. He's told the story many times over the years, always with the same mix of humility and fire. Back then, Busta was raw talent. He had the voice, the charisma, and the hunger, but he hadn't yet mastered his style. He was fascinated with speed rapping but hadn't fully controlled it. Jay-Z, on the other hand, was already polished. Linked with Jaz-O and the Originators, Jay was experimenting with double-time flows and rapid-fire delivery at a level most rappers hadn't even attempted yet. When the two finally faced off, it was a classic high school showdown. The crowd of students circling, the noise bouncing off the cafeteria walls, anticipation heavy in the air. Busta went first. He gave everything he had in one verse, fast, fiery, and full of raw energy. But when he was done, his tank was empty. Jay wasn't finished. He had more verses in the chamber, 2 or 3 ready to go, each sharper, more confident, and more controlled than the last. As Busta himself later admitted, ultimately, Hov got the best of the battle in that moment. He was doing it at an incredible level. My tank was empty real fast. Jay confirmed the story years later on Jimmy Kimmel Live. When asked who won, he simply shrugged and mouthed the word me. It was modest, but it sealed the story's place in hip-hop folklore. For Busta, that cafeteria loss stung, but instead of breaking him, it pushed him.
That's kind of what inspired me to become so dangerous with the speed rap.
He said it was probably the first time he lost a battle that truly mattered, and it lit a fire under him to sharpen every aspect of his craft, his breath control, his flow, his stage presence, his endurance. It was the loss that taught him how to never gas out again. In hindsight, it wasn't a defeat at all. It was fuel. It was the spark that helped create the Busta Rhymes we know today. A performer so dynamic and unstoppable that he can outlast almost anyone on stage. And maybe that's the irony. Losing to Jay-Z in a cafeteria as a teenager gave him the hunger that turned him into one of hip-hop's greatest showmen. Next, we have number 4, Remy Ma. Remy Ma and Busta Rhymes go way back, all the way to 2000, when both were featured on the legendary remix of M.O.P.'s Ante Up. For Remy, who was just 18 at the time, this was her first big commercial appearance. She had snuck into the studio while M.O.P. stepped out, recorded her verse, and by the time they returned, her talent was undeniable. The song became an anthem. But behind the scenes, Remy was carrying a grudge that nobody knew about. It started with something small but deeply personal. On the set of the Ante Up remix video, Remy showed up with a pair of brand new Gucci sunglasses. For a high school girl from the Bronx, these weren't just shades, they were the most expensive thing she had ever bought. But during filming, Busta's larger-than-life energy got the better of him. In the middle of a take, he accidentally broke her glasses. Remy later told the story on Joe Budden's show, laughing in hindsight but confessing the anger she carried. "This was the most expensive thing I'd ever bought in my life, and he broke my glasses. He didn't buy me new ones. He asked the set person for crazy glue. I hated him for 2 years behind that." That was strike 1. Strike 2 came in 2006 when Busta put out the all-female Touch It remix. It featured Missy Elliott, Mary J. Blige, and Raw Digga, but not Remy. And to her, that exclusion was like salt in the wound. On Drink Champs, she vented, "When he put out the Touch It remix and he got Mary, Raw Digga, Missy, I was the out there. Why didn't he call me?" Years later, in 2022, the tension came back again, this time through her husband, Papoose. When Pap was recording the remix for his track Thought I Was Gonna Stop, which also featured 2 Chainz, Lil Wayne, and Busta Rhymes, Pap handed her the phone. She expected a warm greeting. Instead, Busta bragged about his verse saying, "You gonna see when it comes out." Remy recalled being stunned. "The way he was talking, it was like we already had beef. And I was like, oh, so it's lit. Because mind you, I had a secret beef with him too." This wasn't a war of diss tracks or interviews, it was something more personal. Years of small slights, misunderstandings, and feelings of disrespect had piled up. It's one of the strangest entries on Busta's list because it shows that even hip-hop's most explosive beefs can be rooted in something as fragile as a broken pair of Gucci glasses. And just when you think that's wild, the next beef proves Busta's competitive streak could spark even among friends, especially when it came to who ran the stage. And now, number 3, 50 Cent. In hip-hop, not every battle takes place in the booth. Sometimes the most memorable clashes play out in interviews, on Instagram captions, or in front of screaming crowds. That's exactly what happened when 50 Cent decided to come for Busta Rhymes' crown as the greatest live performer in rap. It started with a clip that spread like wildfire. In an interview, 50 casually recited a few lines from Busta's 1997 classic, "Put Your Hands Where My Eyes Could See." Then, with that signature smirk, he looked straight into the camera and said, "I do his shit better than him. He better not play with me. I'll on and perform Busta Rhymes' show." It was a classic 50 move, bold, dismissive, and guaranteed to stir things up. And Busta? He wasn't about to let that slide. He fired back on social media with a clapback drenched in sarcasm. "You Fifth? I'ma give it up to you. Your production? Incredible. Your lights? Incredible. Dancers? Incredible. Outfit changes? Incredible. But if you think doing this shit all night," and then Busta mocked 50's stiff hand-bobbing motion, "looking like you're fanning a fart is better than Busta Rhymes? You out your rabbit mind." The internet went crazy. Within hours, memes flooded Twitter and Instagram. Fans repeated the phrase, "fanning a fart," like it was the newest catchphrase in hip-hop. And that's Busta at his best, taking what could have been a serious insult and flipping it into comedy that still kept the sting. But 50 wasn't done. When Busta shared his impressive body transformation, shedding weight, showing off a six-pack, and celebrating his health, most fans applauded. 50, however, used it as ammunition. He reposted Busta's before picture, placing it side by side with a shot of comedian Tracy Morgan sporting a similar belly. His caption? "They really kinda look alike, right?" LOL. It was vintage 50 Cent trolling. For years, he's built a reputation as one of hip-hop's most relentless internet instigators, roasting Ja Rule, Diddy, Floyd Mayweather, and countless others. This time, Busta was his target, but here's what made it different. Busta gave it right back. Instead of getting defensive, he leaned into the comedy, mocking 50's tight-buttoned face while promoting his new album. It wasn't just beef, it was the hip-hop version of the Dozens, the back-and-forth roasting game rooted in black culture. Sharp, funny, and sometimes cruel, the Dozens test with as much as pride. And in this battle, both Busta and 50 showed they knew how to play. Here's the real twist. Even while they were roasting each other online, 50 still had Busta as an opener on his final lap tour, celebrating the 20th anniversary of Get Rich or Die Tryin'. The very same man claiming he was the better performer still trusted Busta to hype up his crowds night after night. And the truth? Busta stole shows. With Spliff Star by his side, his breath control flawless, and his energy unmatched, he proved why for decades fans have called him one of the best live acts in hip-hop history. So what started as a joking feud actually reinforced both men's reputations. 50 as the ultimate troll, and Busta as the performer who can't be outshined. Next up, number 2. Ja Rule. The early 2000s were nothing short of a war zone in hip-hop. At the center of the storm was the infamous feud between 50 Cent and Ja Rule, a beef so vicious it didn't just stay on wax. It spilled into the streets, courtrooms, and even corporate boardrooms. G-Unit vs. Murder Inc. was about more than who had the hottest single. It was about survival, power, and territory, at a time when rap beefs could literally mean life or death. And somehow, right in the middle of that storm stood Busta Rhymes. Busta's involvement wasn't straightforward. He wasn't originally a main player in the G-Unit vs. Murder Inc. saga, but hip-hop beef has a way of dragging in anyone even remotely connected.
Ja just felt like he gonna diss everybody that's cool with Fifth.
Rumors began swirling that Busta had aligned himself with 50 Cent and his crew. On one of G-Unit's infamous mixtapes, there was a skit mocking Ja Rule's signature love ballads, twisting Would I Be Without You into a Cookie Monster parody. Some fans and insiders claimed it was Busta himself doing the impression. Whether that was true or not, the rumor was enough to tie his name to the feud. Around the same time, Ja Rule released his notorious diss track, Loose Change. On that record, Ja lashed out not only at 50, but also at Eminem, Dr. Dre, and unexpectedly Busta Rhymes. For Busta, who hadn't even officially declared sides, being name-dropped in Ja's war anthem instantly placed him on the battlefield. To this day, the timeline remains murky. Some fans insist Ja came for Busta first with Loose Change. Others argue that if Busta really was behind the mocking skit, then he fired the opening shot. The truth may never be known, but what's certain is that the tension between the two became undeniable. Then things escalated beyond music. Just 2 days before the 2003 Grammy Awards, Busta's black GMC Suburban was riddled with bullets outside his management office in Chelsea, Manhattan. Thankfully, nobody was in the SUV at the time. Still, the shooting rattled the industry. Whispers immediately tied the attack to the ongoing Murder Inc. G-Unit war. Whether it was connected or just an eerie coincidence, the timing was chilling. Suddenly, Busta wasn't just another rapper caught in the crossfire of a lyrical feud, he was potentially a target in a very real street conflict. When Grammy weekend arrived, the paranoia was palpable. Reports from insiders described the backstage atmosphere as tense and hostile. Security staff were allegedly instructed to keep Busta's entourage and Ja Rule's Murder Inc. crew as far apart as possible. Dressing room assignments were rearranged at the last minute. Even red carpet arrival times had to be staggered to avoid a confrontation in front of the cameras. One source went so far as to claim that there had been a gunfight between entourages before the ceremony. That detail has never been verified, but whether true or exaggerated, it captured the very real sense of fear that hung over the night. This was bigger than a rap beef. It wasn't just about lyrical jabs or who was dominating the radio, it was about hip-hop politics and how quickly they could entangle even artists who hadn't asked to be in the middle. For Busta, whose career had always been about showmanship, creativity, and raw energy, being dragged into the violent underbelly of the 50 versus Ja feud was a reminder that in that era, nobody was safe from collateral damage. And maybe that's what made this particular hate so complicated. It wasn't a rivalry born of ego, like his battle with Jay-Z. It wasn't rooted in comedy or trolling, like with 50 Cent. This was a feud shaped by fear, paranoia, and the very real possibility of violence. Busta's name alone was enough to pull him into the chaos, and for years, the whispers about his run-ins with Ja Rule have remained one of the darker chapters in his story. And while that paranoia cast a long shadow over the Grammys, Busta's most complicated hate wouldn't be tied to bullets or beef at all. It would come from culture, faith, and the heavy burden of misrepresentation. Finally, at number 1, The Narcissist. In 2008, Busta Rhymes released what was supposed to be a simple party anthem. The track was called Arab Money, produced by Ron Browse. And on the surface, it was just another flashy, club-ready song celebrating wealth and excess. The problem? The hook. Instead of using authentic Arabic, Ron Browse sang a string of syllables that sounded Arabic to non-speakers, but were actually meaningless gibberish.
So, as an Arab, at first when I heard it, it was sort of offensive,
For many fans in the Middle East, it felt like their language and culture were being used as a gimmick, a punchline for a song about money. Things got worse with the remix. Busta and others began rapping lines that directly lifted verses from the Quran. For practicing Muslims, this crossed the line from tone-deaf to outright blasphemous. Imagine walking into a nightclub, hearing a sacred religious verse, something you'd hear in a mosque, being blasted over a beat while people dance with bottles in the air. To many, it wasn't just disrespectful, it was offensive at the deepest level. The backlash was swift. Radio stations in the UK and the US faced pressure to pull the record. Blogs and forums lit up with debates. Was Busta mocking Arabic culture? Or had he simply failed to check what was being said on his own record? Either way, the damage was done. That's when The Narcissist, an Iraqi-Canadian rapper and academic-born Yasin Al-Zalman, stepped in. To him, this wasn't just another hip-hop controversy. He felt personally attacked. In his own words, as an Arab, it was offensive to see gibberish used like that. If you want to big up money, fine, but do it in the right language. There's more to the Middle East than Dubai nightlife. There's pain. There's culture. In just 15 minutes, he recorded Arab Money Response. Unlike the original, his version used actual Arabic phrases. He rapped about Iraq, Palestine, Lebanon, the real struggles of the Middle East, reminding the world that the region wasn't just a playground for luxury cars and oil money, but a place weighed down by war, loss, and resilience. The track leaked online and quickly went viral in underground circles. For many listeners, The Narcissist had said what they were thinking, but didn't have the platform to express. Hip-hop should be about representation, not misrepresentation. Here's where the story takes an unexpected turn. Instead of dismissing the criticism, Busta actually listened. The two spoke directly. Busta explained that he hadn't intended to offend anyone, that he too understood the pain of profiling and discrimination as a black man in America. He acknowledged that the way the record was presented was harmful, and the label moved to pull versions of the track from the radio. For a brief moment, it looked like a resolution, but then the song returned. Later versions of Arab Money still carried the same gibberish hook. The changes were minimal, the marketing continued, and for The Narcissist, it was crushing. After all the conversations and the initial pullback, it felt like the industry had chosen profit over principle. As he put it in interviews, it was proof that sometimes the machine values hits over healing, and that's what makes this beef different from the others on Busta's list. It wasn't about clout. It wasn't about who was the better MC. It wasn't even about New York turf politics. It was about culture, identity, and respect. Arab Money exposed a bigger question that still haunts hip-hop today. When does cultural appreciation cross into cultural appropriation? And who gets to draw that line? For Busta, the controversy became a scar on an otherwise legendary catalog. For The Narcissist, it was proof of why artists from marginalized communities have to speak up, even when it means going against giants. This wasn't just hate born from ego, it was a clash of values. And it left behind one of the most important lessons in Busta's long, complicated history, that sometimes the loudest battles aren't fought with diss tracks or fists, but with the struggle for representation itself. From nightclub melees to secret grudges, from cafeteria battles to cultural firestorms, Busta's 6 hates reveal every shade of what it means to clash in hip-hop. Some of these beefs ended in laughter, some in danger, and some in quiet reflection. But together, they show the complexity of a man who's always been larger than life on stage, in the booth, and even in his grudges. So the question is, which of these 6 beefs do you think shaped Busta the most? Was it losing to Jay-Z in school? Was it Remy's secret hate? Or was it the Arab Money backlash that forced him to face a global audience? Drop your thoughts below, because if this is what Busta finally admits, imagine the grudges he's still keeping to himself.